The rain had been falling since late afternoon, a steady, patient tapping against the windows that made the house feel smaller than it was. I'd lived here for 15 years, long enough to know every creak in the floorboards, every groan of the old staircase when the temperature dropped. That night, the house smelled faintly of coffee and dust, the kind of ordinary comfort I'd learned to rely on ever since my son moved out. Ethan was 22 now. Independent. Busy. He called when he remembered. Texted when he needed something. I told myself that was normal, that the quiet was something to be proud of. Still, some evenings, the silence pressed in a little too hard. I was rinsing a mug at the sink when I heard laughter from the living room. It startled me. I hadn't heard the front door open. I dried my hands slowly, listening. The laugh came again, low, warm, unfamiliar. Then Ethan's voice, older than I ever expected it to sound, answering back. I stepped into the hallway just as they appeared near the couch, shaking rain from their jackets. "Dad," Ethan said, smiling. "You remember Lucas? From college?" Lucas. I did remember. Vaguely. He'd been around during breaks, a tall presence lingering at the edges of family dinners. But this time, he looked different, broader somehow, more confident. 23, if I recalled correctly. Definitely not a kid. Still, something about the way his eyes met mine made me pause longer than I meant to. "Hey," I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. Lucas grinned. "Hey, sir." There was an ease about him, like he belonged here already. He kicked off his shoes, rain-dark hair curling slightly at the edges. Ethan disappeared down the hall to grab something he'd forgotten, leaving the two of us standing there, the space between us oddly charged. "So," Lucas said, glancing around. "This is where the legend lives." I raised an eyebrow. "Legend? You know," he laughed. "Ethan's dad. The guy who survived single parenting and still kept the house standing." Then, casually, too casually, he added, "Guess that makes you, Daddy, right?" He said it like a joke. A harmless tease. I laughed because that's what you do. Because anything else would have made it strange. Still, the word lingered in the air longer than it should have, settling somewhere I didn't want to look at too closely. Ethan came back, oblivious, already talking about staying the night because of the storm. I nodded automatically, my mind elsewhere. Lucas's presence filled the room in a way I couldn't explain, like a low hum beneath the ordinary sounds of rain and conversation. As the evening went on, I noticed small things. The way Lucas watched me when he thought I wasn't looking. The way the house felt different with him in it, too warm, too awake. Later, as I turned off the lights and headed upstairs, I heard a soft sound from the guest room. A laugh, a door clicking shut. I paused at the top of the stairs, my hand still on the railing. Why did that single word echo in my head? And why did I have the uneasy feeling that nothing about this visit was going to stay simple for long? Morning came quietly, the kind that slips in without asking permission. The rain had thinned to a gray mist, clinging to the windows like a memory that didn't want to let go. I woke before my alarm, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house breathe. Someone shifted downstairs. The sound was faint, bare feet on hardwood, a cabinet door closing too carefully. For a moment, I thought I was imagining it. Ethan used to sneak around like that when he was younger, trying not to wake me before school. The habit of listening for him never really left. I lay there longer than necessary, my mind already awake, already restless. By the time I went down, the kitchen lights were on. Lucas stood at the counter in one of Ethan's old college hoodies, sleeves pushed up, hair still damp from a shower. He looked up when he heard me, that easy smile sliding into place like it had been waiting. "Morning," he said. "Hope you don't mind, I made coffee." The smell was strong and familiar, but the scene wasn't. This was my routine, my quiet hour before the day began. Seeing him there felt like a small disruption, subtle but undeniable. "Help yourself," I replied. "Ethan still asleep?" Lucas nodded. "Dead to the world." There was something oddly intimate about that, two of us awake while my son slept down the hall. I poured myself a cup, leaned against the counter, keeping a careful distance. The rain tapped softly again, not loud enough to be noticed unless you were listening for it. "So," he said, stirring sugar he didn't need. "This place, It feels different in the morning. How so? Like it remembers things, he shrugged. You can tell someone lived a lot of life here. I didn't know how to answer that. Instead, I watched the steam curl upward, dissipating as quickly as it formed. Lucas's gaze lingered on me, thoughtful, curious. Not the quick glance of a guest, but the steady look of someone trying to read between the lines. When Ethan finally emerged, the spell broke. Laughter returned, noise filled the gaps. We ate breakfast together, talked about nothing important, classes, work, plans that didn't involve me. I told myself that was good. Normal. Still, I noticed how Lucas leaned in when I spoke. How his knee brushed mine under the table and didn't move right away. I noticed, and then I pretended not to. The day passed in fragments. Ethan left mid-morning to meet someone, promising to be back by dinner. Lucas stayed behind, claiming he needed to finish an assignment. The house settled again, but it wasn't the same silence as before. I worked in my home office, door half open. Every so often, I heard him pacing, typing, humming under his breath. At one point, the power flickered, just a blink, and the hum stopped. The quiet that followed felt heavy, expectant. You ever think about leaving this place? Lucas asked later, appearing in the doorway without knocking. I looked up from my screen. Leaving? Yeah. Starting over somewhere else. I considered the question longer than it deserved. This is home. He nodded slowly, as if filing that away. Must be nice, knowing where you belong. Something in his tone tugged at me. I gestured for him to come in, offered the spare chair. We talked then, really talked. About his family, distant and complicated. About my life after Ethan's mother left. The words came easier than I expected, spilling into spaces I usually kept sealed. At some point, he laughed softly. You're not at all like I imagined. And how did you imagine me? Intimidating, he admitted. Untouchable. Like someone who has it all figured out. I shook my head. Nobody does. Our eyes held for a second too long. I felt it then, a tightening in my chest, a warning bell I chose to ignore. The afternoon light shifted, shadows stretching across the room. Somewhere in the house, a door creaked. Lucas's gaze flicked toward the sound. Ethan? He asked. I checked my phone. No messages. Probably just the house. But when I stood to look, the hallway was empty. The guest room door, closed. A strange unease settled over me, irrational and persistent. I told myself it was nothing. Houses make noise. Minds make stories. Dinner came and went without Ethan. He texted late, apologetic, said he'd crash elsewhere. Lucas read the message over my shoulder, his expression unreadable. So, he said, forcing a smile. Looks like it's just us. The words landed heavier than they should have. We ate in the quiet, the clink of utensils too loud. Afterward, Lucas helped with the dishes, standing closer than necessary. When his hand brushed mine this time, it lingered. Sorry, he murmured, though he didn't move away right away. It's fine, I said quickly. Too quickly. Later, as night wrapped itself around the house, we sat in the living room, a movie playing neither of us watched. The rain had started again, harder now, wind rattling the windows. Lucas shifted beside me, knees touching. I felt the warmth of him, the steady rise and fall of his breathing. You ever feel like something's about to change, he said quietly, even if you don't know what. I swallowed. Change isn't always a good thing. He turned to look at me, really look. Sometimes it's necessary. Thunder rolled in the distance. The lights flickered again, longer this time, plunging the room into near darkness before coming back. My heart was pounding, for reasons I didn't want to name. From upstairs, a floorboard creaked. We both froze. Did you hear that? Lucas whispered. I nodded, every nerve suddenly awake. The sound came again, slow, deliberate steps. I stood, the room feeling suddenly too small, too charged. Ethan, I called out. No answer, just the soft, unmistakable sound of a door opening. I took a step toward the stairs, Lucas close behind me. Whatever was waiting up there, truth, mistake, or something I couldn't take back, I knew one thing with chilling clarity. This was the moment everything began to tip, and there was no easy way to stop it now. The staircase felt longer than it ever had before. Each step creaked under my weight, the sound sharp in the quiet. Lucas followed close behind me. I could feel him without looking, the heat of his presence pressing into my back. The hallway upstairs was dark except for the thin strip of light spilling from beneath Ethan's bedroom door. My heart was pounding hard enough to make my ears ring. "Ethan," I called again, softer this time. Nothing. The door at the end of the hall, the guest room, was closed. It hadn't been earlier. I knew that for a fact. I stood there, caught between two doors, my mind racing through explanations that made less sense the longer I stood still. Lucas leaned in, his voice barely above a breath. "You want me to check?" "No," I said too quickly. Then, more quietly, "I'll do it." My hand hovered over the doorknob. A ridiculous thought crossed my mind, that once I opened it, something would be set in motion that I couldn't undo. That this was the last second of innocence, however thin it already was. I turned the knob. The room was empty, the bed untouched, the window cracked open, curtains stirring slightly as the wind pushed rain-scented air inside. Relief hit me first, sharp and disorienting, followed immediately by something else. Disappointment, confusion, a sense of being unmoored. Behind me, Lucas exhaled slowly. "Guess it really was just the house." I nodded, though my thoughts were already slipping somewhere dangerous. I closed the door and turned back toward the hallway. The light from the bathroom cast soft shadows across Lucas's face, carving out lines I hadn't noticed before. He looked serious, focused. "You okay?" he asked. "I should be asking you that." He hesitated, then shrugged. "Just weird night." We stood there, neither of us moving. The space between us felt charged, like the air before lightning strikes. I became acutely aware of how close we were, close enough to see the faint freckle near his collarbone, close enough to hear the subtle hitch in his breathing. "This is wrong," I told myself. The thought came loud and clear, but it didn't carry the weight it should have. "Lucas," I began, intending to say something sensible. Something parental, responsible. He interrupted me with a nervous laugh. "You know, when I joked earlier, about calling you that, I didn't mean to make things awkward. That," I said carefully, "isn't really appropriate." "I know," he said quickly. "I know. I'm sorry." But his eyes didn't look sorry. They looked searching, vulnerable. And suddenly, I saw something else there too, something I'd been pretending not to notice all evening. "Sometimes," he went on, "you say things as a joke because you're afraid of what it might mean if you didn't." My throat tightened. "Lucas, you're Ethan's friend." "I am," he said. "That's why I've been trying not to think about this." "Think about what?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. Silence stretched between us. Downstairs, the wind rattled the windows. The house felt like it was holding its breath. "You," he said finally. The word landed like a blow. I stepped back instinctively, guilt flooding in so fast it made me dizzy. "This can't happen," I said. "It shouldn't even be a conversation." "I'm not asking for anything," he replied. "I just needed you to know." I wanted to tell him he was confused. That he'd misread kindness for something else. That this was a phase, or loneliness, or the storm talking. But even as the excuses lined up in my head, my body betrayed me. My pulse, my breath, the undeniable truth that some part of me had known this was coming. "Do you have any idea," I said, my voice shaking now, "how much this could hurt him?" Lucas looked down, shame flickering across his face. Every second. That did it. The sight of his guilt mirrored my own too perfectly. I turned away, pacing a few steps down the hall, dragging a hand through my hair. This wasn't desire, it was chaos. It was everything I'd worked so hard to keep contained. "I'm supposed to be better than this," I muttered. "Maybe you're just human," he said softly. I stopped. Slowly, I turned back to him. The distance between us felt unbearable now. He hadn't moved, but it was like something invisible was pulling us together. I could hear my own heartbeat, loud and insistent. "Lucas," I warned, though I wasn't sure what I was warning him, or myself, against. He took one step closer. Then another. I should have stopped him. I knew that. I knew exactly how to end this before it crossed a line that couldn't be erased. But my feet stayed rooted to the floor, my resolve unraveling with every inch he closed. When he stopped, there was barely any space left between us. I don't want to ruin anything, he whispered. I just don't want to keep pretending I don't feel this. His hand lifted, hesitant, trembling, and hovered near my arm. He didn't touch me, not yet. The restraint was almost worse than if he had. Tell me to stop, he said. The word stop sat heavy on my tongue. I thought of Ethan, of the quiet mornings, the empty house, the years of pushing parts of myself aside because there was never room for them. I thought of how alive I felt in this moment, and how terrifying that was. Thunder cracked overhead, close enough to make the walls shudder. Lucas's eyes never left mine. And in that suspended second, balanced between right and wrong, between everything I was and everything I was afraid of becoming, I realized the truth. Whatever I said next would change everything. So why couldn't I make myself speak? I don't remember moving, only the sensation of space returning between us. One moment, Lucas was there, too close, too real, and the next I was at the end of the hall, my back against the wall, breathing like I'd just run up the stairs. My palms were damp, my chest felt tight, as if the house itself had wrapped a hand around my ribs. Lucas stayed where he was. That felt important. I should go, he said finally, his voice rough around the edges. Not angry, not embarrassed, just changed. It's late, I replied automatically, then hated myself for it. For the invitation hidden inside concern. He nodded once. I know. We stood there in silence again, the moment stretched thin and fragile. The hallway light flickered softly, buzzing like an insect trapped in glass. Somewhere below us, the heater kicked on, a low hum vibrating through the floor. I didn't mean to put this on you, Lucas said. You didn't ask for it. I didn't stop it, I answered, more to myself than to him. His eyes met mine, searching. That's not the same thing. I wasn't sure I agreed. Or maybe I was afraid that I did. We went downstairs without another word, each step heavy with what we weren't saying. In the living room, the television had shut itself off, leaving the room lit only by the lamp in the corner. Shadows stretched long across the walls, distorting familiar shapes into something almost unrecognizable. Lucas grabbed his jacket from the back of the chair, then hesitated. You don't have to leave, I said, then closed my eyes for half a second, steadying myself. I mean, if you want to stay, sleep, we can talk in the morning. The word talk felt like a lie. He studied me, his expression unreadable. That might make things worse. The honesty of it stung. Yeah, I said quietly. It might. He slipped on his shoes, movements slow, deliberate. When he reached the door, he paused again, hand on the knob. For what it's worth, he said without turning around, I don't regret saying it. Even if nothing ever comes of it. The door clicked open. Cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of wet pavement and rain-soaked leaves. I wanted to say something meaningful. Something that would restore order. Instead, all I managed was, be careful driving. Lucas laughed softly, once. Then he was gone. The door closed behind him with a final, echoing thud. I stood there longer than I should have, staring at the door like it might open again on its own. The house settled around me, the quiet returning, but it wasn't the same quiet as before. This one was charged, restless, full of unanswered questions. I went upstairs alone. Ethan's room was dark, untouched. His absence felt louder now, like a presence in itself. I stood outside his door for a moment, guilt twisting in my stomach, then moved on. In my bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed, hands clasped together, replaying every second of the night. Every look, every word I should have said differently. The line I'd let blur, then snap back into place too late to pretend it had never wavered. Sleep didn't come easily. When it finally did, it was shallow and fractured, filled with half-formed dreams and sudden waking thoughts. Lucas's voice, Ethan's smile, the word that had started as a joke and ended as something else entirely. Morning light crept in through the curtains, pale and unforgiving. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A message. From Ethan. Hey Dad. Sorry again about last night. Lucas, make it home okay? I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering uselessly above the keyboard. Did he? What did okay even mean anymore? Downstairs, the house was quiet, unchanged in all the ways that mattered and utterly different in all the ways that didn't. I poured myself coffee and watched the steam rise, feeling like I was standing at the edge of something I couldn't see clearly yet. I hadn't crossed the line, but I'd come close enough to know how thin it really was. And as I finally typed a reply to my son, careful, neutral, incomplete, I couldn't shake the uneasy certainty that this wasn't over. Not even close. Ethan came home 2 days later. I knew because I heard his car before I saw him, engine cutting off, door slamming, the familiar rhythm of his footsteps on the porch. My body reacted before my mind did, tension coiling tight in my chest. I stood at the kitchen counter, pretending to focus on nothing in particular. "Hey, Dad," he said, stepping inside like nothing had changed. I turned, forcing a smile that felt stiff at the edges. "Hey, long weekend?" "Yeah," he shrugged, dropping his bag by the door. "Sorry I bailed the other night." "It's fine," I said quickly. Too quickly again. "Stuff happens." He studied me for a moment, brow creasing just slightly. Not suspicion. Not yet. Just curiosity. He looked older standing there, taller somehow, and the realization sent a sharp pang through me. "Lucas said he left pretty late," Ethan added casually. "Storm was rough." My stomach tightened. "He made it home." Ethan nodded, satisfied, and moved on, already talking about classes, plans, noise filling the spaces where silence had lived too long. I answered when I was supposed to, laughed when the moment called for it, but every word felt rehearsed. Every glance felt like it carried more weight than it should. Lucas didn't come over again. Not that week. Not the next. His absence was louder than his presence ever had been. I noticed it in the empty guest room, the untouched coffee mug, the way Ethan checked his phone more often, frustration creeping into his voice when messages went unanswered. "They're just busy," I told myself. Or maybe I was telling Ethan. Or maybe neither of us believed it. One evening, a notification lit up my phone. A message from Lucas. "Hope you're okay." That was all. I stared at it longer than necessary, my thumb hovering just like it had before. A dozen responses crowded my head, apologies, boundaries, questions I was afraid to ask. In the end, I typed something safe. Something meaningless. "I am you." The reply didn't come right away. When it finally did, hours later, it was even shorter. "Yeah." No punctuation. No invitation. The distance settled in then, not relief, not closure, but something unresolved and aching. We were all orbiting the same truth from different angles, careful not to collide, afraid of what might happen if we did. A week later, I heard Ethan on the phone in his room, his voice low, strained. "You don't have to avoid me," he said. "I just want to understand." I stood in the hallway, frozen, listening to the muffled silence on the other end of the call. Then, quietly, his door closed. That night, sleep refused to come again. I lay awake, staring into the dark, replaying every moment, every choice that had led us here. Nothing had happened, and yet, everything had. In the early hours of the morning, my phone buzzed once more. Another message from Lucas. "I think we need to talk. In person." No explanation. No timing. Just the weight of what it implied. I set the phone down, my heart pounding, the house utterly still around me. Somewhere between fear and anticipation, a single thought took root, clear and undeniable. Whatever conversation was coming next wouldn't just be about us. It would be about what happens when lines are tested, when silence isn't enough, and when pretending nothing changed becomes the most dangerous lie of all. And this time, I wasn't sure there would be any way back. The rain had been relentless all evening, drumming a steady rhythm against the windows. I sat at the kitchen table, nursing a cup of lukewarm coffee, staring at the soft blur of water streaking down the glass. The house smelled faintly of old wood and damp carpet, familiar and comforting, like a blanket I'd wrapped around myself for years. It was quiet, too quiet, and I wasn't sure if that was a relief or a warning. Ethan had gone out earlier, promising he'd be back before the storm got worse. He was 22 now, independent in ways I both admired and feared. I tried not to think about how quickly he was slipping from my life, how the house felt emptier with every passing week. I told myself I was used to it. But tonight, the emptiness pressed a little too hard. That's when I heard it, laughter. Low, warm, and unexpected. I froze, listening. The sound wasn't Ethan's. Not quite. It carried a confidence, a playfulness that made the hair on the back of my neck rise. I wasn't expecting anyone. The front door had been locked since morning. I set down the coffee and moved toward the living room. The laughter came again, followed by Ethan's voice, older, more casual than I remembered. And then I saw him. Lucas. I remembered him from years ago. Ethan's college friend who had shown up at the house a few times, polite, shy, the kind of kid you didn't notice unless he wanted you to. But standing there in the dim light of the living room, rain dripping from his jacket, he looked different. Taller, broader, somehow more present. "Hey," I said, surprised at how steady my voice sounded. "Hey, sir," he replied with a grin that was too easy, too familiar. Ethan waved from the hallway, disappearing for a moment to grab something he'd left behind, leaving the two of us in the room together. I noticed things I hadn't before, the tilt of Lucas's head, the way his eyes lingered just a fraction too long. A part of me wanted to look away. Another part couldn't. "Guess this makes you, Daddy, then," he said casually, a teasing smirk dancing on his lips. I laughed. It was a joke, obviously. That's what I told myself. A harmless joke. But the word settled into the air and didn't leave. It made the room feel smaller, warmer, sharper. Ethan returned, oblivious, and the normal chatter of friendship resumed. I tried to follow along, to anchor myself in routine, but the tension clung to me. Every laugh, every glance between Lucas and me, carried a weight I wasn't ready to name. Later, as I turned off the lights and climbed the stairs, I heard it again. A soft laugh, muffled and intimate, coming from the guest room. The door clicked shut. I paused on the landing, hand on the railing. Why did that single word echo in my mind? And why did I feel, deep in my chest, that nothing about this visit would remain simple for long?